Hello and welcome to today's History Hack. In case you hadn't noticed, we've done a bit of a relaunch. You can find our new website at historyhack.co.uk. You're going to find bios there, merch eventually. Our favourite beardy weirdo cartoonist will be on that. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you like us, you can show your appreciation by giving us a 5-star shiny review on Apple so more people see us on their podcast feeds. We'd really appreciate it. If you feel like sustaining us with a one-off nod to say thanks, you can do so on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com/historyhack. And if you really like us and want to be a patron supporter and one of our favourites, then we've changed the way our tiers are organised, and there's lots of new incentives and free content heading your way on Patreon. That's patreon.com/historyhack. As ever, all of those links will be in the show notes. And today I have with me Charlie. Hello.
Hey, that's a lot to get through.
I know, but it's boring business stuff, but we have to do it because
It's got to be done.
we've gone for adulting in a big way now. After 4 years of bumbling around like frat boys, we've decided to actually monetize the business that we have. And it
Good.
means sensible stuff like that at the beginning of a lesson. But let's give some people some history. Who did you bring with you today?
Oh, you've got a proper treat today, guys. So today I've brought Damian Lewis with me. He's a million-copy best-selling author and a World War II historian. Now, having worked as a war and conflict reporter for some time with the world's major broadcasters, he's gone and swapped the small screen for the big one. And The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, directed by Guy Ritchie, is going to be in cinemas this June. He's probably the hardest working author you'll meet, and he's here to discuss his newest book, SAS Great Escapes #3. Hi, Damien.
Hi, guys. It's great to be back.
It's really, really good to have you, and thank you so much for giving us all this content to talk about.
No, that's fantastic, and I love it. You got the movie in there at the start.
Yeah, well, this I'm going to get onto at the end, I promise.
This is it, isn't it? Like new adult us.
I know we've got
Prepared.
we've got like Hollywood royalty here with Damian Lewis. He's like getting films made. This is okay. Let's backtrack before I get too excited. Damien, SAS Great Escapes Volume 3. Do you think it's fair to say that the men of the SAS keep you in content with all their exploits?
Yeah, that'd be a fair comment. I mean, by the nature of the the unit and the individuals involved and their operations, especially in World War II, they were small scale units, so 4, 8, 12 man patrols. They were deep behind enemy lines. They were on missions, against all odds. The chances of coming back weren't that high. The chance of getting killed or injured were very high, and the chance of getting captured were very high. So, they just lend themselves to getting captured and executing these extraordinary escapes. And the more stories that I research of, significant missions when I'm writing a mission-based story, the more I come across these extraordinary, incredible escape stories that are kind of, in addition to the main story, but are equally as compelling. And that's why we've had SAS Great Escapes 1, 2, and now 3.
Amazing. Looking forward to 4.
Indeed.
When you run out, you're going to go onto the SBS.
Yep. And then you could try the Commandos, and then there's the American. I mean, it's just endless, isn't
Never
it?
going to run out of nutters, are you?
That's right.
I've just started researching. I've got a load of French books coming about French commandos in the Pacific, so that should be fun. I think we've been lucky enough to speak to you before, haven't we, about Forged in Hell? But for any listeners that are new to the SAS, I don't know where you've been. Special Air Service. Can you set up where we are in Great Escapes 3? Who are they? Who are the key players, and where are they?
So SAS was formed officially in the summer of 41 in the North African desert by David Stirling, the SAS founder. It went on to be commanded after Stirling's capture in February 43 by Colonel Blair Paddy Mayne, who was the commander of the SAS then for most of the war. And it was the first, you could argue, special operations unit ever formed. It's what the rest of the world's special forces to this day are based upon. So, for example, when they wanted to found the US Delta Force, which was the nearest SAS equivalent in America, they put individuals from it through SAS selection in the UK to work out how we did it and then go and model American units on it. So that's who the SAS are. And SAS Great Escapes 3 starts in North Africa, where they were founded. In fact, it doesn't actually. It starts even prior to the SAS being founded. I'm lying. So in terms of the SAS officially being founded, yes, Chapter 2 is a North African operation and escape. But Chapter 1, it's intriguing, is actually a story about the SAS before the SAS were founded. And that sounds like a tautology, but it's not, because in the summer of 1940, after we were kicked out of Europe and Dunkirk and all that came with it, Colonel Dudley Clark, this incredibly underappreciated figure from World War II, went to church and said, "We need a way of striking back. We need these forces, unconventional forces, that can carry out these pinprick raids." And he proposed the commandos as an idea. Churchill loved it. And because they were all volunteers, they were called Special Service Volunteers, or Volunteers for Special Service. They realised they needed airborne commandos as well. They inserted air into that, and it became Special Air Service. So by September, October 1940, 11 Special Air Service Brigade had been formed, and they called it number 11 because Dudley Clark was a genius at deception, and he thought, if we call it 11, the Germans will find out they think we've got 1 to 10 already formed, and therefore we have 5,500 airborne forces, not 500. So 11 Special Air Service Brigade was up and running by the turn of the year, and its first operation was in February, so February 1941, and it was Operation Colossus, to 36 men parachuting into Italy to blow up an aqueduct carrying fresh drinking water to 3 million Italians and deprive them of that drinking water and shut down the key Italian ports. It was a Special Operations Executive mission, so SOE, they're the guys who dreamt it up. And it's an extraordinary operation, and it is the first SAS mission. And when David Stirling founded the SAS in the summer of 41, so several months later, it was because Dudley Clark had been sent to North Africa to mastermind deception operations. And Clark met Stirling. Stirling explained what he was doing, and Dudley Clark said, "Call it the SAS, because there's already a pedigree there, and in terms of my deception operations, it adds meat to the bone." So that's the first story, and that's the real origin story of the SAS.
Gosh, isn't that funny that that's a name that you hear David Stirling quite a lot with, in association with the SAS, but you don't tend to hear Dudley Clark's name.
Not at all. No, I mean it's just unknown history, which Stirling recognised it. He's quite open about the fact that he inherited the name from that pedigree, and that was the inspiration and Dudley Clark's role. But in the post-war history and the mythologizing of the SS, the legend, it's just largely been forgotten. But the first story in SAS Great Escapes 3 is about that Operation Colossus, by 11 Special Air Service Brigade, and then follows the escape of a chap called Sapper Alfred Parker.
That's brilliant. I'd like to talk to you about some of the names in this book, because your process, if I'm right, kind of revolves around getting as many first-hand interviews as is humanly possible, and where that's not possible, obviously now family interviews and first-hand accounts, anything you can get hold of. And you have brought some new people to the fore in Great Escapes 3. So who are they, and where did you find them?
Well, I guess the one that springs to mind most of all is Major Oswald Cary Elwes, who is a remarkable figure from World War II in terms of the SAS, and he's practically never been written about before. And so Cary Elwes, among many, many incredible exploits, which he never spoke to his family about. So I've been helped enormously by his family, who are wonderful. They've been, they've opened up the whole of the family archives to me. But even they were not aware of the greatest operation Cary Elwes ever executed in the Second World War. And you could argue it's one of the greatest operations of World War II in its entirety in terms of these kind of elite forces missions. So in September 43, the SAS landed as the tip of the spear in the Op Husky operation, the Allied landings to open up the soft underbelly of Europe, as we called it, which it didn't turn out to be. Of course, it was very hard fought. And Cary Elwes commands a squadron of SAS who land at Taranto. So we're talking September 1943. And very shortly, an escaped Yugoslav partisan turns up and says, "I've escaped from a concentration camp. It's at Pistici, about 150 kilometres away." And of course, no one in Allied command knew what a concentration camp was. And he says they're about to ship everybody in that camp to Nazi Germany because the Allies have landed. And so the only force that could conceivably go and assault and rescue those held in the concentration camp was the SAS, for obvious reasons. But they only had their jeeps, and you can fit 4 men in a jeep, and it's pretty damn crammed. So they needed a means to do so. So Cary Elwes decided they would hijack a train, steam the train all the way through enemy territory, get to the concentration camp, assault the concentration camp, capture the fascist commander of the concentration camp, release all the people held there, load them aboard the train, steam back again, and deliver them to Allied lines. And that is exactly what they proceeded to do. So that's just one incredible operation that Cary Elwes masterminded. And when I came across the first report on that mission, which I found in the family archive of Colonel Blair Paddy Mayne, it was just a paragraph, and I didn't believe it. I thought, no, this could not have happened. I've never read anything about this anywhere else. No, don't believe it. And then I came across 2 other reports that corroborated it, and lo and behold, it's true. So I then contacted Kate Cary Elwes, who's the daughter, and I said, you sat down, and I told her, and she knew nothing about it. And when she'd asked her father what he used to do in the war, he would say to her, oh no, my dear, that's not something I think you're going to be interested in. He would never say a word. She said the only thing he'd ever said to her was, in the SAS, we were taught to drive locomotives. So she was just blown away by learning that about her father. I was talking to her yesterday, and she said, because I've managed to get a copy of the book too. It's just my advanced copies arrived. I sent her one. She said, I've suddenly learned to appreciate my father in ways I never did, and I wish he was still alive and I could talk to him about all these things. So yeah, it's those kind of journeys are very special, and without the assistance of the family and without the wonderful archives we had in this country, these stories could not be written.
And so much of them. I mean, this is what I love about your writing, and I love about these stories. They sound completely made up. They sound like Hollywood film plots.
It is like you think about it, don't you? It's just what on earth? How is that the plan you come up with? Like the complexity of it and the nuttiness of it. Like, well, clearly that's what we're going to do, isn't it obvious?
I tell you, it's even more insane than that, because Cary Elwes' second in command was Raymond Couraud. Raymond Couraud was a former French Foreign Legionnaire who'd fought in the defence of France, deserted from the Legion, because if you're in the Legion, you're then supposed to serve Vichy France, and he wasn't willing to do that. Escaped Marseille, having been a gangster in Marseille, and then meeting Mary Jane Gould, the fabulously wealthy American socialist, falling in love, rescuing 2,000 Jews from Nazi-occupied Europe. Then the Gestapo penetrate their network. Couraud escapes, makes his way to Britain by the most amazing means possible, volunteers for the SOE, becomes an SOE agent, changes his name to Raymond Fox because he was half American, serves with the SOE as an assassin, right? Carries out all these incredible missions, eventually gets busted by the Gestapo so they know who he is, then volunteers for the SAS because he's not going to stop. He can't serve with the SOE anymore because they know who he is. The enemy know who he is. And then joins the SAS, and that train rescue mission, he's Cary Elwes' deputy, and he's the guy who actually runs the train side of it. What Cary Elwes does is he gets in the jeeps, drives across enemy lines, deep into enemy territory, to hold the main junction, to make sure the train can steam through, get to the camp, load up the concentration camp inmates, and drive back again without being stopped at that junction. That's the mission. And so on that train, the majority of the SAS soldiers on that train, they're not even British. They're Raymond Couraud's French Foreign Legion squadron that joined the SAS. So they're Russians, they're German Jews, they're Poles. I mean, it is, I
think I read they're running around with Spaniards and Hungarians, aren't they? It's
Spanish Civil War veterans, absolutely, yeah. So the whole thing is just, it's that you can understand. When I read the first 2-paragraph report, I thought, no, that didn't happen, that can't happen, but it did. And the extraordinary thing is, you imagine the mindset of someone like, Major Oswald Cary Elwes after the war, who the only thing he ever says to his family, yes, we were taught to drive locomotives in the SAS, having carried out that, because that's not a military mission, it's a humanitarian mission. There's no military objective. You don't capture territory. You don't strike a knockout blow to the enemy. You don't seize a strategic target. It's a humanitarian mission. It's in the spirit of what Courant was doing in Marseille, rescuing 2,000 Jews and getting them out of Nazi-occupied Europe, and not to ever breathe a word about it. Just extraordinary.
It is indeed. Can we talk about Tanky? Well, Gareth would love to hear about Tanky. He's probably listening. This one was involved in Operation Speedwell. What comes next sounds like the plot of yet another movie, which you should definitely take this up with Guy Ritchie. Can you tell us about his many escapes?
Yeah, so Tanky Challoner was dropped into northern Italy on Operation Speedwell, and so Speedwell, in a nutshell, was a mission designed to stop the Germans rushing reinforcements to the Italian the front line in Italy. Okay, that was the raison d'etre for it. And so Tanky Challoner and a handful of other individuals were sent in, laden down with explosives, with very little food, basically to blow up locomotives in tunnels, to block the key passes and to stop the German war materials getting to the front line. They were sent in basically with no escape plan. So they were dropped hundreds of kilometres behind the front line. And I mean, when I say like no escape plan, I'll give you an example. In the first chapter in the book, in Operation Colossus with 11 SAS, they had an escape plan. Those 36 men were dropped in. They were going to blow up the aqueduct, but then make their way west through Italy and get picked up off the western Italian coast by a submarine. And the submarine was sent in to pick them up. That's an escape plan. And Tanky Challoner and the others on Speedwell went, and they had no escape plan at all, apart from you will make your way overland to Allied lines. Well, at the time they dropped in, that was hundreds of kilometres away. And of course, as soon as they dropped in, their radios didn't work. And so they had no way knowing where the Allied front lines were. And, their missions on Speedwell, certainly Challoner and his colleagues' missions, are incredibly successful. They magnificent scenes of blowing up, at one stage, blowing up 2 locomotives in the same tunnel, travelling in opposite directions. But then ensues this escape, which is just, it's epic in scope. And there are so many times in Challoner's escape where he's been captured or where he's facing his SS interrogators, and you believe he's finished, and somehow he always gets out again alive. There's that one moment where he dresses up as an Italian washerwoman, for example, and gets posted through the hatch where they're feeding the prisoners of war, and he pulls it off, and it just goes to the heart of what David Stirling and Paddy Mayne used to inculcate in everybody who passed selection into the SAS, that everybody, it was an egalitarian unit. Everybody was equal regardless of rank, pretty much. Rank didn't matter, merit mattered. And because of that, it empowered people. It didn't matter your education, your class, your rank. None of those things mattered. What mattered was how you would soldier and how you would stand with your fellow brothers in arms. And it also meant that because you were empowered, you were a self-starter. They used to say, if everybody else on your patrol is killed and you're the only man left alive, still go ahead and prosecute the mission. And equally, if you're the only person captured, it's your duty to get out if you possibly can and rejoin your brothers in arms to carry on the fight. And if you study those individuals who escape and try to get to the heart of why they risked so much, because if you were captured trying to escape, bad things happen to you. By now Hitler's commando order had been long issued, and bad things would happen if you were captured. So if you study the reasons why they were so determined to do so, a lot of it's down to guilt. It's the guilt of being in a prisoner of war camp, having a reasonably easy time of it, when they knew that their friends and their brothers in arms were still carrying out these incredibly dangerous operations behind enemy lines to try and vanquish the Nazi threat. So most of them were driven to escape by guilt and the hunger to get back to the unit and back to what they did best.
I think what I love about Tanky so much is you get, I think it's a couple of occasions on that escape where he's cornered by either German troops and then later the SS, and they sort of say to him, "Are you English?" And he just sort of says, "Yeah, I'm English." And it's almost just the balls on the guy. He's so brave. I just find him endearing, completely endearing.
Yeah, he was a rough diamond character, certainly. But if you read about other operations he carried out throughout the war, because bear in mind, that escape after that escape, he's then back with his unit and he soldiers for the rest of the war. He is one of those standout figures in the unit. But there were so many of them. That's one of the kind of common denominators of them. There were lots of rough diamonds, but in the SAS they somehow found their natural home.
I mean, there are sort of various commonalities that come through with the escapes as well, isn't there? I mean, the Great Escapes does what it says on the tin. They're all incredible and they're all unique in that, there are different missions in different places. But what kind of themes revealed themselves to you about the ones that you looked at in this book?
I think the endurance of the human spirit and the desire never to give up. I mean, World War II was a very unique, special time because the majority of the men who stepped forward, all volunteers for the SAS, were not from a military background. Look at Blair Paddy Mayne, arguably the most highly decorated soldier of World War II, certainly one of the most legendary. He was a solicitor before the war. He was the Irish University's heavyweight boxing champion. He was a multiple capped rugby international for Ireland and the British Lions. He was not a soldier. That's so common. So they came out of civilian life, volunteered for this maverick, piratical, off-the-wall unit, soldiering in a way which was deeply popular with most in high command, because this wasn't the gentlemanly way that British officers and British men were supposed to do things, and that empowered them. It gave them, it gave them a milieu in which they could thrive, and they were. You read the accounts, they believed, and they were that they were fighting the good fight. They were fighting against an evil, an overarching evil that had to be defeated. And that's one of the themes that does come through very, very strongly, is that, if you read about and study that incredible esprit de corps, which almost universally, everybody who served in that unit who's left the record says, we knew nothing like it before the war. We knew we would know nothing like it after the war in terms of the camaraderie. It's that camaraderie which gets them through some of these escape stories, or it's the promise of returning to that camaraderie as well. So it's the camaraderie between individuals if they're not escaping solo, but it's the camaraderie they know they are returning to when they get back to their unit that drives them onwards. So that combination of knowing you're fighting for something which is absolutely just. In fact, you're fighting for the freedom and survival of your own family and your own country, if nothing else, and for the survival of civilization in the world, but also the knowledge that you are part of this elite, exalted fraternity. And look, if you study what was the one thing that every member of the SS dreaded more than anything else? It wasn't getting killed or wounded or captured. It was getting returned to unit. It was getting RTU'd. It was getting sent back to the regular military unit from which you had come, because they didn't want to leave this exalted brotherhood. That kind of encapsulates, I think, what drove a lot of this burning desire to get away from the enemy and get back to their own kind.
And they're helped a lot by local people on the way, aren't they? This was something I sort of noticed from looking at some of these various escapes in this book, that they don't really know who they can trust, but they do get helped quite a lot, and it's quite wonderful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So in Italy, in particular, in Tanki Chalana's story, but also in Huff's story as well, they are massively helped by the local Italians. And let's not forget, the Italian partisans were a force to be reckoned with. Bear in mind, General Kesselring, Hitler's chosen commander in Italy, they'd vowed Italy would not fall. Kesselring got so enraged at the activities of the partisans, who he declared had killed something like 26,000 German troops after the Italian armistice and the fighting in Italy really begins, that he declared that for every German soldier killed, 10 Italians would be murdered. And this was men, women, children. Whole villages were razed. So when you read those stories of those Italian civilians and families or partisans helping these escapees, that is what they were risking. They were risking, the SS and Gestapo turning up at their farm or their house or their village and literally laying waste to everything and everyone they held dear. So, that's something that we must never forget, that bravery and that solidarity from those in Italy who believed that, fascism in Italy had to be overturned and Nazism had to be defeated was to the fore.
I think another thing that probably has a constant appearance is maybe PTSD. Like I feel like with what they were doing and how they were doing it, there's no way you come out of that without being affected in some way, maybe in a different way from a different kind of soldier. But how were they treated in terms of their mental health and PTSD? Was it an extra special consideration or is it just completely absent?
No account for it whatsoever. Bear in mind, PTSD wasn't even recognised or diagnosed back then. In fact, there's one story in the book I'm just finishing about a chap called Joe Goldsmith, who's actually features in SS Forged in Hell. He's one of the heroes of the book, and he is diagnosed with psychoneurosis. That's what they called it at the time. And the treatment for psychoneurosis, well, there was no treatment. They gave them electroshock therapy, among other things. And Joe Goldsmith, having been treated in inverted commas, is then sent back to the SAS. This is prior to D-Day, and he goes absent without leave. He goes AWOL because he's traumatized, deeply traumatized, and so he's put up on a court-martial charge for being absent without leave because he's got PTSD, or they didn't recognise it at the time. And eventually, he's told, "We'll drop the charges if you agree to deploy on the D-Day operations because we need men with your experience." So he deploys into France on an operation into France, and very quickly he ends up in a French hospital plagued by what we now know as PTSD. So it was very, very common and completely unrecognised. So shameful. I mean, that's how it was viewed. You were ill. You were sick. You were psychologically sick. It was shameful. And certainly after the war and even during the war, they self-medicated with alcohol. That's what you did. You went to the bar and got horrendously uproariously drunk because you needed to do something to deal with the trauma. So hugely relevant. And I've had various of my books read by a foremost UK PTSD specialist called Ross Townsend, and she said, "Look, one of these operations for several weeks or months on end, facing that kind of tension and trauma over that extended a period of time, never being able to relax or drop your guard is enough to, and seeing those terrible things happen to your friends and doing terrible things to the enemy, that's enough to give you PTSD. 5 years of back-to-back operations, it's inconceivable you wouldn't suffer from it." And the final thing that, if I got time, I'll just add, she said, the people who are most prone to PTSD are those with imagination and empathy. It's going to sound a strange thing. The people who most excelled in the SAS were those who embodied imagination and empathy. Why? Because you needed imagination to think of ways to attack the enemy that was so unexpected, the enemy would never imagine it happening, and therefore would have no defences to that mode of attack, which is exactly what the SAS specialised in doing. And you needed empathy because you needed to care about those brother warriors in your patrol or under your command. Look at the foremost leaders, look at Paddy Mayne. Paddy Mayne's empathy was off the scale. You speak to any of the veterans who served alongside him, as I have, and they say that man loved his men. And you knew he would lead from the front, never expect anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. And you knew he cared about you so much. If any one of you were captured or lost his life, he would feel it in his heart. And he would do everything he could to protect his men and bring you out alive. That's why they would follow him into hell. So imagination and empathy were key to these kind of operations. They are also what make you most prone to PTSD.
Incredible. I mean, I just think that they are. The more I learn of them, and the more people you introduce me to through the books, it's just heroism on a whole other scale. Bally heroes, I think, is the appropriate term for them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the courage is, it never ceases to amaze you. And bear in mind, certainly by end of 43, early 44, they knew the commander order was in place. They knew that if they were captured, I think it's 108 SAS were captured in operations in France and Germany. I think 7 came back alive. So 101 were murdered. So those were your odds, because Hitler's commander order, it wasn't just very clear. Anyone captured in uniform, out of uniform, armed or unarmed, would only be kept alive for long enough for the SS and Gestapo to interrogate them, and then they would be shot out of hand. And the commander order ended with a warning to any officer in the German military who refused to obey it that they would face something similar. So, your chances of survival if you were captured were extremely slim, and not just survival. If you were captured, it wasn't just that you would obviously your life would come to an end, but it would come to an end in very, very, very nasty, unpleasant ways before you were actually killed.
Okay, well, I'm going to bring it back to something more fluffy because that is incredibly, incredibly intense, and what they went through was insane. We couldn't have you come and talk to us today, Damien, without asking you about the movie. So, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, guys, it's ready to meet its audience. It's ready for you all. It's going to be in cinemas in June. But Damien, I wanted to ask you what the process of that has been like for you as the author of the source material and as a historian. Has Guy Ritchie stuck to the facts, or has he played fast and loose? And is that okay? How are you feeling about it all?
The movie is how shall I put this? It's not a factually rigorous portrayal of the missions that it portrays. However, the book's absolutely factual. So read the book, get
Excellent.
the true story. If the movie gets seen by millions of people, hopefully it popularizes World War II and these kind of operations and these individuals, which I'm all for. Just to give you an indication, I watched it with my family. I was sent an early copy about 2 or 3 months ago, and so that's me, my wife, my 15-year-old daughter, my 19-year-old son, and my 21-year-old son. Everybody loved it. So it is a family movie. So
Brilliant.
somehow they've managed to do that with it, which is a great thing to have done. And the one thing that I do like about it is that, and you can see this if you go on online and you watch the outtakes of the movie, you will see not only are they having a really the stars in the movie, they're having a really great time shooting it, but there's something they did something to recreate the ethos of the SAS. Well, it was an SOE operation of the SOE at the time. So I'll give you an example. I was obliged to go to the premiere in New York about 2 months ago, and the female SOE agent in the movie is played by Eiza Gonzalez, who's a Mexican actress. Brilliant. In fact, you could almost argue she steals the whole movie. Her performance is so amazing. Anyway, so I'd met her before, but I met her and I had a coin from the Special Forces Club in London with the Spirit of Resistance and the SOE symbol on it. And I gave it to her and I said, this is from the Special Forces Club in London, just to say thanks for portraying these incredibly brave women in the way that you have, because you've done it brilliantly and so respectfully. And they were the bravest of the brave, because these women went into enemy occupied territory in civilian clothing, deep behind the lines, with nothing to protect them but their spirit and their essence and their intelligence and their grace. And many of them never came back alive. And I said, that's just to say thank you. She said, I studied these women intensively before taking on this role. She said, I wanted to get it right. She said, this means so much to me to have that. So it mattered to them that they had captured the spirit and the essence of these individuals, if not the actual factual accuracy of all the missions.
I can't wait to watch it. I know we're definitely going to be there opening weekend for that one. And do you have Henry Cavill's phone number at all?
Henry Cavill or Alan Richardson, which one do you want? I've got them both.
Alex, you can pick first.
Yeah, I'm going Henry Cavill.
Oh, it's been so lovely to talk to you, Damien. Alex, have you enjoyed hearing about these crazy exploits?
I really have, and also the filmmaking part of it as well. So my friend Josh, the Dunkirk film was based on his book of Dunkirk, and he was an advisor on that. And I remember after everyone kept moaning about the fact that the Messerschmitt had a yellow nose cone, he was like, "Yeah, I told Christopher Nolan. Said he didn't care. It was iconic." So, he said, I picked my battles. I said, I learnt to pick my battles. And the yellow nose cone was the least of the stuff that kept me up at night about what was happening in the film.
There you go.
So I think, and also speaking to John Orlov as well about getting Masters of the Air to the screen and him saying it bears no resemblance to what I originally pitched. So
yeah,
I think you have to admit that you've let your baby go once you sign up for film and TV.
You have to roll with the punches, and you really do. And
it's no longer your creative effort; it's everyone's. There's lots more brains entering the fray, isn't there?
That's right. I mean, I was getting sent, was going to send text messages from one of the producers. I'd be here writing, it'd be 6 a.m, I get a text message. Oh, it's so and so. All right, open it up. We're just refining the lines of Churchill's speech. You think you can just rewrite these 2 pages and just give us what would he really say here? And I'd say, yeah, okay. When do you need me to do it by? Thinking it'd be like in a week's time. So when we start shooting at 9, you've got 2 hours.
Also, as well, can you just rewrite Churchill? What? One of the greatest speech mongering public people ever. You want me to do better?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it was. You're absolutely right. It's Hollywood. You've got to roll with the punches. That's just the way it is.
I think I won't tell you which writer told me this, but he said every time I wanted to kill someone, I looked at my bank balance and thought, done your job. Someone else's creative project now. Just suck it up.
Well, I think it's you made the best point there, Damien. If it brings people to the story and if it's not doing harm, then it's brilliant because hopefully people are going to want to pick up the book.
Yeah, the book, the movie's out in the States and it's got brilliant audience feedback. So that's people are taking families to it, and I think that's a great thing. So I'm behind these guys.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to see which one of your great escapes gets made into a film next, because this book is full of them. Guys, SAS Great Escapes Volume 3 by Damien Lewis is published by Quercus Books. It's out now. Pick yourself up a copy. I promise you won't regret it. Thank you so much for joining us, Damien.
No, my pleasure as always, and looking forward to being back at some stage. Yeah.
That's it from us today. Thank you very much for listening. We'd prefer it if you went to bookshop.org via the link in the episode notes and used our site, because then they give us a cut and Amazon doesn't get anything because they've got enough money. They owe me a refund and have done for the last 2 weeks, so fuck them. You will find new bios, info, and soon merchandise up on our website, designed by our favourite beardy weirdo cartoonist, Steve. You can also, if you want to show your appreciation, you can give us a 5-star review. You just literally need to write anything, I think, in the box. So you literally just tell us who you hate more than anyone else in history. That'll do for this week. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to give us a one-off donation, you can go to ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/historyhack. Or you can become one of our very favourite people and subscribe regularly at Patreon. That's patreon.com/historyhack. So today, if you're not having a good day, I want you to bear in mind that it could be worse. You could be Henry VIII, who by the end of his life was in such a bad state and so overweight that his courtiers had to haul him up and down stairs via a system of levers and pulleys. So there you go, there's always someone worse off than you. Thanks for listening, and let's see you next time.